Take care. Welcome to Books Boys, live from the Grand Library, the Dean and PJ. He's PJ.
Hello there.
I'm the Dean, and we are the Books Boys.
The one and only.
This is the Books Boys show. Get it? Buy it? Books.
Books. It's the end of the year, but Dean, I have to tell you, I'm still a bit confused. I mean, again, I went to my local library.
Okay.
And
good.
Between the cat food and the disinfectant, I mean, that's where the books are kept, right? It's between the cat food and the...
Should be, yeah.
I mean, I was looking for an old copy of Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. And it was very hard to read the writing. I mean, it was almost transparent. It was in rolls. So, I mean, that's where you get the storage, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
you
like
get them in rolls, in scrolls, yeah.
Yeah, it was very hard to distinguish. I mean, it was really... I don't know what's up nowadays, guys, but... You have to make the ink a bit deeper. It was very hard to distinguish between Julius Caesar and the latest edition of Bridget Jones' Diary of.
Okay. And you got this beside the disinfectant. BJ, is it possible now that you got the toilet roll again?
What? I thought toilet rolls are kept in libraries and.
It's tricky, you know. Confused. They tell us that the books come on paper. It's tricky. Look, we're over a year into this. I'm not sure if we've made any progress, you know.
Right. Well, look, I was hoping to do my annual review in great detail of Julius Caesar, but obviously didn't work out, guys. So other books shall be reviewed, and just keep looking for those books. Keep looking for those. They might not always be in roll format. I hear they also flatten them nowadays.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they flatten them. Yeah.
Right. Okay, fair enough. All right, so that explains that why I've read one book this month, because I did find something, and it's in Japanese, so I had to really make an effort this month. It's been very Japanese.
At least we got something. Read. You know, it doesn't matter the language.
Oh, indeed.
We should start, I guess, by wishing that everyone had a good Christmas and a good New Year's. And we're going to start off 2022 with some books discussion. But just say thanks, you know, everyone for listening. And of course, you can get us on Radio Oxen in Oxfordshire and on all your usual podcatchers. And we're part of the TNC network and everything like that. So just thanks to everyone who's tuned in. PJ, do you know how many shows we've done on Patreon this month?
Now, I know you've been very busy with our mutual friend.
With our mutual friend, yes.
And we did one too. You did a lot, especially you did a lot of shows. Was it about 10 shows?
You know, it must be close. So we released Books Boys episode 14 on December 1st. December 4th, I did episode 12 of Forensic Friends. That's the ancient Greek court speeches. That was a Demosthenes. December 7th, Dark Place Dreamers, Hell Hath Fury with Dark Place Robert. That was the Richard Ayoade and Matt Berry crazy show where they're in a hospital, but it's a show within a show and they've got shotguns and there's things flying around with telekinesis. I love the show and he hated it, and it's quite funny to review together.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I love Richard Ayoade, so I haven't actually seen that.
Then December 11th with our mutual friend, which I think we can now name as Playboy Alex. We did Playboys episode 7, Measure for Measure. We spent a full hour reviewing in detail all the themes and characters from Measure for Measure. December 16th, Music Men 2, the Christmas Time collection, all my old Christmas songs. That one is a bit dodgy, so listen with care. Some of those songs are not the best. December 18th, Playboys episode 8, Othello. We spent a full hour and a half on that one. Really, really got into the nitty-gritty of Othello. And those are both on the A-level syllabus, those two Playboys. So any A-level English students, it's worth listening to that one. Mm-hmm. December 20th, interviews from the Vault 8 with a lovely singer-songwriter, Meghan Cary, from her album Building This House. So we talked about that. December 22nd, Film Fellows Episode 3, Robert and Alex and myself, we all watched Nightcrawler. You remember Nightcrawler, PJ?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Oh, my God. That would have been great to be part of the discussion because I really did enjoy that movie as well.
So,
I mean, you're the ultimate fan. You must have seen it around like 10 times now.
Oh, more. I'd say more. Yeah, I've seen it millions of times. And while we recorded that, we also recorded Caper Captains Episode 6 because Alex had also read And Then There Were None. So we released that on Christmas Day, no less.
It's also one of my favorite Agatha Christie books.
Mm-hmm. And then myself and yourself, we did Episode 2 of Poetry Pals. And we talked about some of your poems just now.
That's great. Well,
so that's a ridiculous amount of content. And you can get it for $3 or £2.50.
I mean, yeah, it's only for £2.50. Casa some great content. That's just a part of what we did all year round. We started this in April with a series of Shakespeare episodes, and it expanded to, I think, around 8 different categories, including the perhaps not as popular series so far, Renaissance.
Yeah, we did Renaissance. We did Dr. Faustus. We never got around to Tamburlaine, but maybe one day.
We tried Tamburlaine. I'm afraid I didn't get through. I was enjoying
it's very dull.
Okay. So, look, I was honestly enjoying the beginning, but then it's a 200-page play if you add the 2 parts. Yeah, but Dr. Faustus, we Renaissance to Renaissance, but I'm afraid the Renaissance also then deceased.
It was a very brief flash in the pan Renaissance.
Exactly, yeah.
We did a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff on there, and you can get that all at patreon.com/booksboys. Playboys, Caper Captains, Film Fellows, it's all on there. Plus, you get this show a day early as well. So for anyone downloading on Apple or whatever, you actually get it a day early and without some of the ads. So there's a benefit there as well. And if you pay a little bit extra, you get a Books Boys t-shirt.
Oh my God. Ooh, well, I'm looking forward to my copy and my own t-shirt, because you said you're going to give me one, and I did see it in Ireland and I didn't get one.
Oh, I need to sort that. Yeah, we need to sort that for you.
And there's something by the way, Dean, and we're keeping this a secret, but there's something very special happening in January.
There should indeed. Yes.
Something very special to start off that lovely year 2022. So keep into it.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited for that. So there'll be good things coming.
Oh, yeah.
Shall we get into what we've read this month? Shall I go first?
Go ahead, yeah.
So now I'm blaming you. I read this one on your recommendation, Isabel Allende, La Casa de los Espiritus, so the House of Spirits. Now, this one took me half the month. It's almost 500 pages, 450 pages, whatever. But man, they're slow pages. I'll tell you what my problem.
I've got to tell you, I didn't recommend the House of Spirits to you. I recommended the Japanese Lover.
Okay. I was aware that you recommended the author. Maybe I decided that the book title sounded good.
You see, like I've been wanting to read that book because it is very popular in Spain and Latin America, and it's supposed to be good fun. But you didn't enjoy it.
My main problem with it is there's very little dialogue, so it's just narrative. So there's little bits of dialogue, sure, now and again, but it's really 450 pages just block text that never stops, and it was very tedious at times. I don't like that. Okay. I like to kind of skip through the descriptions and get to the discussions, and there was really very few discussions. It made me read it so slowly. It made it really a struggle for me. I read it in Spanish, of course, and it's all right. And the title's a bit of a misnomer. So the reason it's called The House of Spirits is because of Clara, right? Clara is the clairvoyant and, well named. But we see her parents, and that's fine. And then they have 2 daughters, Clara and Bella. Bella's the beautiful, okay? And there's a chap who loves Bella. And she's got green hair and whatever, and she's very strikingly beautiful. And then I was thinking, oh, this is brilliant. I love the romance. They're talking about the beauty of this girl. She's like a work of art. All the men think she's amazing. And then she dies very, very early. Like at the beginning of the book, she's gone. So the same guy who was engaged to Bella is like, well, I'll just marry her sister, sure. So I marry Clara instead. But look, he's not a nice guy. Esteban. He's not a nice guy because he's having affairs. He's not just having affairs. He's essentially raping a lot of peasants. He's like, I'll just go on the horse, take the lasso, and catch a peasant girl. He's just kind of not really a good chap, and he's going to brothels and all this kind of thing. So he's not likable. Clara is likable, and from her, it's the House of Spirits because she's like talking to spirits and doing all this clairvoyant stuff. But there's not really an awful lot of that. And then once it goes through several generations, so we have the parents, then we have Clara and Bella, then we have Bianca, which is her child, and then Alba. Once Clara kind of gets old, the spirits thing becomes irrelevant. Like this isn't a book all about like different spirits and things like that. It's really irrelevant. The title is quite misleading, actually. So that made me, a little bit sad. There's one great line, because some of the family aren't great, when I just mentioned the rapes and things. And there's a bit where Bianca gets pregnant and, she's not married. And her dad says, well, I'm not going to have any B words in this family. And she says, well, I think if you look, you'll find that there's some already. that's the one quote I really remember very well from the book.
Okay.
But look, it's fine. There's a couple of funny moments. There's a lot of rapes, actually. It's quite difficult, even of children. There's difficult bits to read in this.
That's very interesting because I've only read one novel of hers, which is El Amante Japonés, the Japanese lover, which came out, I think, around 2016 or 2015. And right. And it did have more dialogue. So this is her first novel, The House of Spirits. So maybe she matured. Got
more dialogue in.
But the same thing, the most striking thing I remember about the book was both the historical kind of, it was talking about the Japanese concentration camps in the US. I don't know if you know about them. The US concentration camps after the Japanese, which is not something that people talk about, that the US had concentration camps for Japanese, which were treated better than in the Nazis concentration camps. I think, that's debatable.
Yeah, wow.
But it really talked about that. But the most striking thing for me was there was a scene in it where basically a child was used for pornography, and it was more updated than what it sounds to, because it was really about internet pedophile pornography. And I thought, Jesus, very, very extreme, because it was pretty detailed as well. So maybe it must be a thing with her to be showing the dark side
of
society.
Her themes, I guess. Yeah.
So it was still very striking and I suppose relevant, because you do have to talk about this awful stuff at some point. And she was trying to just, but it's heavy going. It
made it because you've got the character and he's going around with a horse lassoing and everything, and you think it's almost ridiculous. But then when there's a scene with a chap molesting a child, that hit me too hard. That's not ridiculous anymore. That's just this is difficult to read. And then there's a poetry, it's not a beautiful poetry, it's a disgustingly dark poetry where one of the chaps who eventually gets revenge on the family is the product of, he's like, well, I'm actually your son and you don't know it because you raped my mum, so now I'm going to rape your daughter. And he tries to create this cyclical, in his mind, some kind of poet, beautiful poetry. Essentially, there's some sick stuff in the book, but it also, as you said about the politics, it gets into the politics of Chile. There's a lot of political stuff, but that comes in more near the end. And to be honest, by that stage, they kind of lost me a little bit. I didn't think the story flowed well enough. We go from generation to generation, and essentially we cover 4 generations. The problem is, a lot of it's just snapshots of their lives, and there's not really an ongoing story thread, So I just find it didn't read like a novel at times. It just didn't flow well. There was nothing to invest me in the story. Sure, there's a few things, but not really enough, because we're moving through such a long period of time and so many generations of the family. And when I kind of finished the book, I sort of thought, what was the point, really? We learn a little bit about Esteban, and it also has an annoying thing of having narration and then occasionally just having some first person narration mixed in with a third person narration, and it's a bit jarring to figure out who's talking at times. But look, it's fine. It's an all right book. I didn't not enjoy it, but I'm kind of wondering, do I want to read any more Isabel Allende? To be honest,
You see, that's very influenced by 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's that whole kind of that book came out in the early 60s, 100 Years of Solitude and House of Spirits came out in the early 80s. And magic realism really follows a lot of that one book, 100 Years of Solitude, which
Yeah.
is generational. And it tells the history of a Latin American country through lenses of several generations of one family. And basically, this sounds very similar. I haven't read
Yeah.
Casa Espiritus, but it's following that idea from the lens, like scenes from the lives of several generations, but then ultimately culminating in some historical, like coup d'etats, or like always ending with some kind of despot who's controlling the country.
Yeah.
And she seems to be telling the story of Chile, whereas Gabriel Garcia Marquez told the story of Colombia and 100 Years of Solitude. I was
sounds
looking
more or
forward
less
to
the
reading-
same, though. Yeah, it sounds more or
I
less
was
the
looking
same.
forward to reading The House of Spirits because I love that 100 Years of Solitude kind of narrative.
Well, I
So
haven't
what
read
was the
it
other
yet,
book then?
but I just this
I
one
recommend it.
I've got a middling review. It was enjoyable enough to read, but nothing special.
Okay.
After that, I promised everyone Christmas Aristotle. Okay, I know that that's what the kids want for Christmas. Okay, and I hope
Of course.
for all the kids listening that they got some. Which brings us, of
Hope
course,
so.
to this month's sponsor. It is, of course, Christmas Aristotle. He is the best of all the Aristotles. And if you go to christmasaristotle.gov, you can get some Aristotle Christmas merchandise. So I read the Nicomachean Ethics, okay? The Ethics for Nicomachean. Would you say...
Now, what you say is very dry because supposedly...
Yeah. I would say it's very dry.
Well, you see, they say it's very dry because supposedly he didn't write it. Supposedly, there's a theory that a student of his wrote down what he got from Aristotle's lecture.
Lecture notes, yeah, that's quite common.
I haven't read
Aristotle.
it. I mean, we're both Plato fans. We're both read Plato. We never really got into Aristotle. So, what made you go into Plato's students?
I just thought it was time. Look, I wrote down many years ago a list of things that I should read at the university library, and now that I've got membership, I've taken that list, this little tiny sliver of paper with 4 or 5 things written down on it that I've carried about with me from house to house, and now I've finally got my library membership back. And so I went in and I read the Nicomachean Ethics. I couldn't do the complete works of Aristotle the way I did with Plato. Half of it's, just animal descriptions and a lot of biology. And then even when you get to the philosophy half, it's like, on the parts of an indivisible line or something like that. I'm not going to read that. I'm sorry. Like, I try my best, but I'm not going to read a book about it.
You got a high tolerance. So.
But look, this one, you'll know a little bit probably from having done philosophy. Aristotle's ethics, they do differ from Plato's. He talks about virtue ethics and things like that. I'm just going to give a couple of quick snapshots from this. There's no point dwelling on it too much. He talks in the beginning about the fact that everything aims for the ultimate good, which he seems to talk about happiness. So happiness seems to be what things are aiming for. But some of this is dry to read. Now each man judges well the things he knows, and of these he is a good judge. And so the man who has been educated in a subject is a good judge of that subject. And the man who has received an all-round education is a good judge in general. And it's just like paragraphs and paragraphs of things that you would just take for granted. If you're educated in the thing, then you know about the thing. There's just pages and pages of this. But
okay, those kind of descriptions,
yeah. And he talks about a lot of different things, universal goods. One of the big things he talks about is practical wisdom, right? Phronesis. So that's like having wisdom in practical things. It's not this like rational wisdom. It's more practical knowledge of like useful things. And he gives us that sort of initial talk about practical wisdom. It wasn't really something that Plato talked about. But this bit's funny. We had perhaps better consider the universal good and discuss what is meant by it. Although such an inquiry is made an uphill one by the fact that the forms have been introduced by friends of our own. So he's saying basically this has been made more difficult because Plato put the damn forms in place. And although it might be thought better, indeed it might be our duty for the sake of maintenance to the truth even, to destroy what touches us closely. So he goes on to basically trash Plato then at that point.
Oh no, okay, his own teacher.
He's like, yeah.
That's what happens with students. They turn their backs to their teachers.
And he disagrees with Socrates at one point as well. He says there's a saying that no one is voluntarily wicked, or no one and he goes on then to say this is partly false, and he kind of trashes then what Socrates said about no one voluntarily doing something bad. There's a big long section on temperance, which goes for just pages and pages about temperance. But essentially, virtue ethics is you take the mean, right? So instead of being really, really scared, which would be cowardice, you also don't want to be foolhardy, which is like you're the first person on the battle line every time. You're running straight in. You're going to get killed. So like for him, courage is actually the medium. And that's,
talks about like a virtuous mean, right? So it's like in the middle, it's like cowardice is too little, and to be rash is then excessive. So you find something in the middle.
Yeah,
isn't that what he,
and that's him for every virtue, essentially. For every virtue and vice, you find something in the middle, whether it's temperance, whether it's whatever. With cowardice, you always go for something in the middle. Problem is, the problem with virtue ethics is it's not consequentialism, so it's not based on the consequences of what you do, and it's not deontology based on rules. It's based on the character of the person, but it's very circular. So, like a good person is the person who does good things. Just like a good lute player is the person who plays the lute well. It doesn't explain anything, and that's the main problem. He said, and he talks about it like a good builder builds well by practicing building, but in order to practice building, he needs to be a good builder, and so it's quite circular. But his idea is if you just keep practicing these things, you'll like express the virtues more, essentially. But it's nice. It's a bit wishy-washy. I don't know how much I really buy into that, but he does some groundbreaking stuff. He says most people do not do these, but take refuge in theory and think that being philosophers, and they will become good in this way, behaving somewhat like patients who listen attentively to their doctors, but do none of the things they're offered to do. So he speaks out actually against essentially other philosophers and sophists and everything. So he sees himself, I think, as being quite groundbreaking, really. But whether or not he really is, I don't know. Look, I'm not going to lie. Obviously, reading this can be quite dull at times.
Yeah.
If you're interested in it, then, you can give it a try. But I'm not necessarily going to say that everyone should go out and read this one, because probably the majority of people won't have any interest in it, and that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of like if you're really into the old ancient Greek philosophy and you've read Plato and you want to move on.
Yeah, look, people keep saying to me, man, look, I finished Plato. Like I read all of Plato. What do I do next? You get Christmas
it's a very common problem, people calling up, and it's a big dilemma, guys. So if you're facing that dilemma, so many of us face, maybe just try out Aristotle.
The problem is so severe. I'm thinking about setting up like a premium rate hotline, and people can just call in.
Right, because we have to deal with these problems, guys. Yeah. Just give us a call,
555 Plato, and they'll say, "What do I do? I've read all of Plato," and I'll say, "Man, Christmas Aristotle, get on it."
Christmas Aristotle, get on it. Here it is. Yeah, so look, government, listen to us. If you want to fund us and just give us some free copies of some Aristotle's work, because this is what we need. It's basically like a heroin addict. You know what I mean? As they come there, give us some more Plato, man. It's like we don't have any more. I'm sorry, but we've got something of a lesser caliber, and maybe this will satisfy up to an extent. And it's radical stuff. Plato. It's very addictive.
I think that the great philosophers, they do go downhill. So, Socrates is my hero. Plato is a little bit less. Aristotle is a little bit less. Each time we go from teacher to student, we lose a little bit of something special.
And then we don't even talk about Seneca or one of those chaps. We just forget about the Romans.
That's it.
You're a big fan of Descartes and his cats. So, that sometimes you get the odd...
Descartes, the ultimate armchair philosopher. I love his gentlemanly lifestyle. He really, that does it for me,
He's great, yeah.
What I'm going to do next is, I've got a clip here. It's less than a minute long, but it was a little book recommendation sent in by our good friend, Dark Place Robert.
Oh, Lord.
Hi, Dean and PJ. I just have a quick book recommendation. It's called How Many Miles to Babylon. I read that when I was in my Leaving Cert year down in the Republic of Ireland. And the entire concept of the book is that it's about an Anglo-Irish man who just wants to be friends with a common Irishman. And there's constantly these barriers being put up. His mother doesn't want him playing with him. He manages to sneak off and play with him occasionally. They both join the army together to fight in World War One. But because he's an Anglo-Irish man, he's put in the position of an officer. So again, there's always this class division between him and his friend that he's just never allowed to overcome. It's an interesting book. I'd have a go at it and see what you make of Classist Ireland.
There you go. Thanks to Robert. And if you like Robert, you can hear him on our Patreon when we talk about Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. Do you know that book, PJ?
I've heard of it. It's by Jennifer Johnston. So if you're into Irish literature, I've heard of the book, and it's quite famous. But no, I haven't actually. Have you had a read?
No, I've spoken to Robert about it, and he asked if he could
to.
send in the recommendation, but I haven't read it. No.
Yeah, I'd love to read. This sounds very good. I like that.
Why don't you tell us what you've read? And I should say real quick before you go, there's only two of us today. I had to give little Alfred Christmas off. All of the money that he's getting paid to be on the show when he's taking Christmas off. You know?
Wow. What's he doing now? What's so good about the thing he's doing? Who does he think he is?
He's got the record player on and he's listening to Ray Conniff Christmas album on vinyl. So he's a very cool chap. Got himself a little glass of...
He's obviously too cool for show right now. And he's literally too cool for show.
He's made an old-fashioned and he's just chilling out. But look, why don't you tell us what you've read, Peter?
Well, talking about Murakami. So I started off the whole kind of Murakami stream, I think, was back in October. I talked about what I talk about when I talk about running.
Mm-hmm.
And then you read Hardboiled Wonderland and the end of the year. Hardboiled Wonderland and the end of the world. And the end of the world. And now we're talking about a book that was released, I think, just after Hardboiled Wonderland. Or I think, straight out, or maybe after Norwegian Wood, around the same time period in the 80s. And it's called Hitsuju Otoko no Christmas, which means the sheep man's adventure. And this book is not translated little pocket edition in Japan. They always give you these, you can get for very cheap these books that just literally fit into your pocket. They often say pocket book, but they never fit into your pocket in Europe. In my experience, they actually do in Japan. You see it here, Dean.
You need to get bigger pockets, PJ.
It fits in the pocket, and I love the fact that this was not a book release because I had read most of Murakami's stuff at that time when I was living in Tokyo. And then I thought, well, look, what else has he got? And he's got a lot of material. He's got half of the literature he's written is not released. Just that the big books, they tend to be released. The big novels, sometimes the big nonfiction books. But this basically is a bit too niche, I think, for the Western market, supposedly, because it's a... What's the word? It's not a sequel. Let's just call it's a spin-off of his third novel, A Wild Sheep Chase, which is often considered his first proper novel because it's really the first novel he really dedicated full time. And The Wild Sheep Chase I read in Japan, and it's a beautiful novel about a man trying to, as an always as Murakami is trying to find himself. He's trying to find himself. Also, he's trying to find his lost friend called the Rat. So The Wild Sheep Chase is third book in the series of novels.
You're holding it up to me, and it's got a delightful little sheep costume chap on the front there.
It's lovely. Look, I love it very much, this book. Basically, it's a spin-off. Because the sheep man is just a man wearing a sheep outfit all the time. He never takes it off. And you're not exactly sure why. And it's just basically the spin-off is about this one character in the book. And Murakami wrote this little novella. It's even shorter than a novella about the sheep man's Christmas. And the sheep man is living in a society where there are people and there are people dressed as sheep. Full time. It's kind of like a society. He went to sheepman school and he studied the sheepman lifestyle. He's dedicated to it. And it starts off him talking to another sheepman and about entering the annual Christmas song competition for sheepman. And it basically decides to write a Christmas song and to win a competition. But this is in the summer and a month passes by, then the next and the next, and no inspiration comes to him.
Mm.
And he blames it on his landlady, who's like, he thinks he's an idiot and a real fool. And he's trying to play the piano and nothing's really happening, not even a single melodic line. And he's very fond of donuts, as you see here in the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always eating his lovely donuts. The donuts was a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
But why am I mentioning that? That's very important to you. Because he goes to a park and there is literally a sheep man expert who goes to talk with him. He's just sitting there kind of conveniently in the park as well. And he invites the sheep man over to dinner. And he tells him, bring along those lovely cinnamon donuts. And so the sheep man goes to visit a sheep man expert.
Mm-hmm.
And the sheep man expert says, I believe, my friend, you are cursed because you understand something is wrong. And he asks him, why do you think you're not? So they talk about the problems, and the sheepman's problem is it's just before Christmas, and I just still haven't written anything. And the sheepman expert asks him, so why do you think you can't compose? And the sheepman says, well, obviously it's the landlady. She hates the stuff I do. I can't really find a safe space. And the sheepman says, well, he believes he's cursed because he's got a hole in him. And the reason why he's got a hole in him was because last Christmas he ate donuts with a hole in them. And then he explained that he got out his Sheepman's History. It's actually called Sheepman History book. And he says, like, sheepmen are not supposed to eat any food with holes inside of them at Christmas time, because Christmas time is also the time of the holy sheep man.
Okay.
And yeah, I know it's very surreal with all this kind of terminology, but basically, I don't want to say anything, but it's basically, as with all Murakami books and novels, it's about filling the vacuum that you believe is inside of you, which is the big thing in his chef d'oeuvre, in his masterpiece. It's often considered the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, or the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. So especially in that book, and also in Kafka on the Shore, it's very much about people who feel there's something inside them that's empty. Or in Colorless Tsukuru and his Years of Pilgrimage, it's about a man who believes he's colorless and that his friends that basically are named after colors have all the colors. It's always about these postmodern figures that think there's something missing inside of them. And literally in this little novella, it's quite figuratively, he ate a donut with a hole in them he shouldn't have, and he's now got a hole inside of him. And how can he fill this hole? How can he find inspiration?
Is there some,
got a few days before Christmas.
PJ, is there some similarity to Orwell here? I mean, I know the style's very different, but most of Orwell's books, we just reviewed a lot of them, have people who think that something's missing. Maybe not from themselves, but from the world. But, you know, it's typically someone who feels that something's wrong. And maybe these sound like, although it's a different way of doing it, there is maybe something similar there.
I think so, yeah. I think it's just this concerned kind of postmodern kind of author, and Orwell's not exactly postmodern, but I think in both of them it's a sense of society doesn't make any sense. What's with all these wars? What's with people in general? Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a similar theme going on there. I never thought about that.
It sounds that way. Well, you liked this one anyway. You liked it more than I liked my two so far.
Yeah, but then the thing is, I love everything he does, and I particularly enjoy the fact that it's just like, it's not really something that you can read. It's hard to get this book. So there it is, guys. It's worth a love. It's The Sheepman's Christmas. Give it a try. And yeah, it's not out in a European language, I don't think, but you can definitely at least start off with the book which it comes from, which is A Wild Sheep's Chase, or just any of his books. There you go. That's my Christmas read. Literally, The Sheepman's Christmas.
Okay. I did read some more. I've got 3 more books. Will I do the one I didn't like first, and then we can finish on happy things?
Go ahead.
H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. This was trash. Sorry, H.G. Wells. And it also suffers from the same problem as the La Casa de los Espiritus, very little dialogue. So it's almost as if H.G. Wells, author of The Time Machine, forgot to get in his time machine and listen to my review of La Casa de los Espiritus before he wrote this. But very little dialogue again. Comes from just before 1900. Look, I've never read H.G. Wells before because I thought I don't really like sci-fi. I knew I wouldn't like him. But then you may remember last year I read one of his books, The Wife of Sir Isaac Harman, and it's a standard Victorian romance, and I loved it. I thought this is one of my favorite books of the year. I really love it. I'll give the chap a chance. Let's try one of his more famous books. I hated this. I really, really hated it. And it's very short, okay? You can see on the cover there's some Martian spaceships attacking some ships, some boats. Well, that's the entire story. No, so basically what happens is there's very little. I like books with character work. That's why I like Dickens. And we don't get that here because it's just all description. So we don't really get to see characters. But very, very short book. It is accessible. It's less than 200 pages. It still took me like a week to read it just because I was bored. But what happens here is some Martian ships land, and it's basically a cylinder. So a cylinder lands, they don't know what's in it, and then it turns out there's some Martians inside. They're in a big pit. They build these big machines, and then they go around with their heat ray laser thing, and they get to to kill things. And the chap runs away, and he's hiding at one point, and then he meets a curate, and they're kind of bunkered up in like a little room, and they can see what's going on. But in all honesty, not really a lot is going on. I don't know why people like this. I mean, you've heard of the book, right? I don't know if you know much about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it yet. I mean, I know it's a bit about the survival of the fittest, and there's a bit of Darwinist elements in them as well. But it's essentially just a sci-fi, right? I thought it was more of a just fun adventure book, the way it sounded.
No, he's just describing the Martians. And then, I mean, there's very, very, very little plot. For most of it, it's just long descriptions of they've got these cylinder things, and now they've got these flying machines and these other machines, and they've got long tentacles, and they're walking around. And then there's a big bit where he moves over and says, well, instead of telling you what's happening here, my brother is in London, so I'll give you what my brother told me happened in London. And then it's just more of the same. So it's just more descriptions of these things. It's just very dull. The actual plot is a short story. You could do it in 10 pages, Yeah. And again, we don't really give away the ending, but it's terrible. I mean, I thought maybe there'd be at least a smart ending. The ending is so weak. It's so bad. I'm sorry. I love The Wife of Sir Isaac Harman. So I'm not saying, H.G. Wells is a bad author or anything like this. And I haven't read The Time Machine, or I think he did The Invisible Man, but this makes me scared. I will try him again. We'll give him another try. But this one,
okay.
It did very little for me. There's so little to say about it. There's just
it doesn't have the usual Victorian sort of, unmarried girl sitting on daddy's lap hoping to get some affection, right? So all that kind of nonsense.
It doesn't. Lacking the closest we get is obviously he's separated from his wife, so he wonders, did she die in this? What's happened? And they think the Martians are taking over the whole world. And there's this one crazy soldier who thinks, well, we just got to get in, get on board with it. And now this is the new world. This is the way it is. That's it. I mean, there's really no romance. There's almost not really a plot. Okay, some Martians come to the world. That's a premise rather than a plot. And then that's it. There's nothing further that really happens, And it's split into 2 books, and book 2 is Life Under the Martians. So I thought, oh, brilliant, we're going to get a full regime of what I was thinking, Battlestar Galactica, when they're on the planet and they're being held by the Cylons are ruling. No, there's nothing like that. It's just, I would say if you unless you really, really think you're going to love it, give this one a miss. Mm-hmm. But the next book I loved. Now, you could probably predict that I was going to love it. It's Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh, Lord, Dean. You and your, that's the ultimate dandy novel.
Written only a few years before the H.G. Wells book, but infinitely superior.
Well, it's a great book.
I'd never read any Oscar Wilde before, I should say.
Really?
But, yeah, surprisingly.
I actually did read his complete work, so I mean, I don't usually do that like you do, but I when I was 15, I really just 16, I think, I just really wanted to read everything. Starring with the picture of Dorian Gray.
Well, this makes
so
me
what do you
want more.
think?
I thought immediately I knew I was going to love it. So even at the preface, it ends with all art is quite useless. And I thought, okay, that's a good quotable moment. Let's see, what this book's about. It's just full of quotes. Like, I swear, you could almost take a book quote from every page.
Well, he's a very quotable author. Like, I can resist everything except temptation is one that I always use.
Yeah, and the book's full of that. Almost every page is something that you could quote, But we have this chap, Dorian Gray, and there's this painter called Basil. And Basil he's painting Dorian, and there's Sir Henry's just their friend, or Lord Henry, actually, sorry, it is. And he's their friend, and he comes in and kind of fills Dorian with some quasi-philosophical nonsense, essentially. But Dorian's beautiful, okay? He's very, very beautiful. That's the key thing. But the conversations they have, man, Henry and Dorian, the most unnatural, ridiculous conversations, walking around the garden, but I loved it. I love the way they're talking. I love the fact that no real people have ever spoken like this. Like, they're talking like they're in a Shakespeare play almost. Like, I love it, like just the levels of romance. It's really doing it for me. But the plot in one sentence is Basil paints Dorian, and the painting is so perfect. And because of what Sir Henry's told him, that he's going to get old and become bitter and horrible, he fears that the painting is actually more beautiful than him, and he's going to age every minute. And obviously the painting won't, and he becomes very jealous of the painting. And at the start, they talk about whether or not Basil should show the painting, in a gallery. And he says, no, I can't, because I've put too much of myself into this. Basil loves Dorian, not in like not a romantic love. He just he admires his beauty, and he says that we saw each other at a party, and we both looked at each other and, across the room, and we just knew that we were meant to be together, but not in like a romantic way again, just in this platonic, like, I'm attracted to the beauty. You're such a charismatic figure. I just need to have you in my life, and I'm going to paint you, and that's all he does. And he, and basically Basil never does anything as good before or after. This is his best piece. And so Henry wants it, and they say, no, you can't have it. It's Dorian's. It was always Dorian's, and Dorian gets to keep the painting. But Dorian reminds me a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde at times. He goes around the town doing a bit of the old swashbuckling, doing a bit of getting up to some chicanery and doing a lot of bad things. And this Basil starts to say, how come everyone leaves the room when you walk in, and you've got a really bad reputation and no one likes you, and all this kind of stuff, and he's just going around the town causing trouble, kind of Hyde style. And really, it turns out that he's really not a very nice person, and he's quite horrible to people. And every time he does bad things, the painting changes.
And and it just becomes uglier and uglier with all the things he does. It's really about morality, isn't it? That sometimes the things we do and the way people react can make us think, so they didn't like that. How can I do it better next time? But in his case, he just knows he can get away with murder, basically, because he wants to always be beautiful. So he does terrible things, which he wouldn't do if he didn't. If he knew that the painting were up there, and the painting is just getting uglier and uglier and uglier.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept, but the curious thing is, that's a good point. If he knows this is happening, why does he keep doing bad things? But it's strange, he seems to not be able to resist doing them, and he just puts the painting away at one point and doesn't want to see it, because he knows he's afraid of anybody else seeing it. He thinks everyone's going to see this painting. I've got to lock it up in this room where no one can see it, and dismiss some of the servants and whatever. They just want anyone to see this painting.
And basically the painting of it is a painting of his soul. And it just
the painting is his soul. So there's a very important detail when he sees the painting and he wants to swap. He says, I'm going to age and the painting's not. I wish it was the other way around. And somehow by magic it is. So he stays young and beautiful, almost like a vampire, almost like the Count of Monte Cristo. Like he stays the same the whole way through. And everyone else starts to, they wonder, like, this guy, he looks, 20 when he's 40, essentially, like he just never ages. But the painting is like getting old and ugly and vicious and mean looking, and And then he does he does really bad things. There's murders and things in the book. But I love this quote from near the beginning. Basil doesn't understand Dorian. He understands his own perfect vision of Dorian. But he idealizes Dorian, and Dorian's not a good chap, and Basil never realizes it. And Basil's shocked, and he says, You're not jealous of material things, are you? And Dorian says, yes, I'm jealous of everything whose beauty does not die. I'm jealous of the portrait you have painted of me, and right to the end, Basil is like shocked that people don't like Dorian. Like he just thinks that because he's beautiful, essentially, that this ancient Greek idea, actually, that beauty is tied in with morality, and he just assumes that because he's beautiful, that he's good. And he's not. And at one point, Dorian meets a nice lady, and that lady's called Sylvia. Sybil Vane, meets Sybil Vane, and he doesn't tell her his name, so she calls him Prince Charming, and that adds to his mystique, So, but he's horrible to her. Like he goes to see her plays every night, and her plays are amazing, and she's a great actress. She did all Shakespeare, so she plays Juliet and all the others, and he falls in love with her. But this girl doesn't really know it. She's like 16 or 17. She doesn't know anything apart from that she's been acting in the theater since she was a teen. That's what her mum told her to do. That's all she knows. So she speaks like a Shakespeare character. Like she doesn't understand anything outside of the play. She acts every 7 nights a week. That's all she knows. And he falls in love with her, and he brings his friends to see her. The problem is, once she discovers real love, the Shakespearean love no longer seems real to her, and she's no longer able to act. And because she does a bad acting performance, he immediately falls out of love with her and hates her immediately. And she's saying, but it's because of you. And he like flings himself onto the sofa in despair. You've killed me. You've killed love. You've killed my emotions. He's very melodramatic, and I love it. And he can't believe that. And they're saying, her mum keeps saying you should marry him. He's a gentleman, And here's an example of her speaking like a Shakespeare character. He is a gentleman. A prince, what more do you want? He wants to enslave you. I shudder at the thought of being free. I want you to be aware of him. To see him is to worship him. To know him is to trust him. And I say, Sybil, you are mad about him. And I love it. She just wants to be his slave almost. Like she's just smitten by him, There's some funny moments in the book as well. It's very unclear whether he really proposed to her or not. And he says, well, I think I did propose to her. And he says, my dear Harry, I did not treat it as a business transaction, and I did not make any formal proposal. I told her that I loved her, and that she said she was not worthy to be my wife. And Harry says, Harry, which is of course Henry, women are wonderfully practical, more practical than we are. In situations of that kind, we often neglect to say anything about marriage, and they always remind us, which I thought was very funny. But there's a bit of that in the book, and a bit of light. I guess technically it's sexism, but it's light enough to be amusing. There's nothing. I mean, there's some bits where the sexism does get a little bit bad, but the stuff with Sybil's sad. I'm not going to spoil what happens, but she's a Shakespeare character. She has a tragic ending. And Dorian doesn't care, and Basil can't believe that Dorian's just off to the theater. Whilst horrible things are happening to the people he loves. He's just like, well, I don't care. I'm going to the theater. He's just so emotionless towards the people that he's supposed to care about. And then we do see a bit of a moral breakdown. The more it goes on and on, he does get worse. And I don't want to spoil what happens, but there's some really great scenes. It's a really good book. Definitely the best of the books that I've read. You could tell I wasn't that keen on the other three, so that's not.
Yeah, that's a really good book. I'd recommend it, guys.
It's an amazing book. I love those type of characters. There's that ultimate lack of morality. He's very vain. He's very beautiful, and the melodramatic moments. You've killed my love. Just because you put on one bad performance out of 100. I love it. Well, we have one more. The last book I read is called "Burn This City to the Ground" by Anne Daniel. This one has a lot of himself in it. The main character is called Daniel, and it is a story about a care worker and his client, Sam, and she's a quadriplegic. She's quite young. she's very vulgar. She essentially tries to discuss. I think she tries to use vulgarity, swearing, aggressiveness, sex, jokes as her shield for like her own pain and her own problems, essentially. And it's just their story, and COVID comes into it, and George Floyd comes into it, and a lot of political events, a lot of current affairs towards the end.
Interesting. Okay, so it's very relevant.
It's very, very relevant, and it's quite an interesting book. And hold on, PJ. I think I hear the phone ringing.
I better answer it.
Let's see who's on the line.
Right.
Hey, you're through the Books Boys. You got Dean and PJ on the line. Who's calling?
Hey, this is and Daniel. I just I think you guys read my book or something like that.
Oh wow, that's it.
Yeah, we were literally just talking about it. Yeah,
that's a crazy coincidence. It's amazing that you're going. That is mad.
How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Just got done with the Christmas holiday. Pretty busy, pretty hectic, but I'm doing okay today. Okay. Got the day off. It's all good.
Awesome. So I read your book. I read Burn the City to the Ground. Now tell me, this is your second book.
Yeah. It's my second book. My first book is called Corners Untouched by Madness. Both books were kind of critically praised. I mean, I'm not a millionaire, obviously my books aren't world famous, but both books did really well. The new book especially is doing well in Minneapolis and
right,
sort of in greater Minnesota, in the United States. And that's where the books take place. So yeah.
Wow. So it's resonating with the crowd. Did you write it for this particular crowd, or were you thinking that maybe the book could expand nationwide or international?
Well, I think when you write a book, though, the plan is usually for it to get as popular as possible. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So, but it's a story about the pandemic and riots in Minnesota. Leading up to that, that's kind of the climax. But so people are especially in Minnesota, are interested in the story. Just because it's sort of like a story about what's been going on here, and
right, relevance.
Yeah, and George Floyd is mentioned in it. I mean, I knew who he was. I volunteered at the shelter he was working at. So even though he's not like a huge part of the story, it's something that's kind of going on in the background, and then also like when he is murdered, like kind of how my quadriplegic client and I, that the story is about how we react to sort of like his death and stuff like that. So people are really interested in hearing stories like that right now, and there aren't a lot right now. So I mean, I really hope that more people come forward and write sort of about these topics.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It touches on the George Floyd stuff. It touches on COVID a bit towards the end as well. So we've got the story about Daniel and everything, and his patient, as you say, Sam. But then we do bring in a few different, current affairs issues, and that's that was quite an interesting take, because it's not a pure nonfiction book either. It is a novel, but we just bring in a lot of elements. And I wanted to ask you how much of this is real, how much of this is based on real events.
When you write, like, actually, that's probably the question that I get the most when people are talking to me about this. But when you write a memoir, it's so hard to it's never going to be real. It's never going to be reality, because you're not going to remember, conversations. You're not really going to remember, I find the hardest thing is the order of events, and how things happen. And you kind of want to set things up where it tells like a cohesive story, and where there's like a beginning and end. And reality just doesn't really, organize itself in that way all the time. So, I would say it's like probably 80% exactly what happened.
Mhm.
Obviously there's a lot of like vulnerable adults, disabled people, so a lot of it has changed, just to protect them, their identities and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I mean, it's like mostly true. I mean, it's not like I just made the whole thing up. It's there are certain plot devices that I use to kind of move the story along. Some of the conversations in the book I kind of wanted to use to sort of steer the narrative of the story, just to touch on specific talking points that I felt were relevant. I feel like the whole idea of memoir is to share with the readership what you know, but do it in a way where they don't have to do the work that you had to do, so
Nice.
And for a memoir, like it does, it flows well. It's easy to read. It reads like a novel. It reads like a story that you can easily dip into. I was able to read it in, I think, 2 days, because I just I wanted to find out what was happening, and I found it very accessible to read, which is good. And it's good to know that a lot of it is real. So I wanted to ask you then, right near the beginning, Daniel, I guess, essentially yourself. First client he's given dies day one. Was that something that was like really difficult to deal with, to process?
Yeah, that was that. It's like that happened day one in the book, but that actually happened a little later in my caregiving career. But it was so significant to me, because it was the first client that I had that passed away.
Oh wow!
So I just kind of wanted to illustrate, like, some people that are disabled don't have any family or friends or anyone visiting them, and their caregivers are the only people that are really like surrounding them. So that was a very true sort of part of the book that actually happened. That's exactly how it happened, but it wasn't like the first experience that I had. Okay. I just kind of put it in there like that to sort of demonstrate that, moving into my client and caring for her, that some people don't have anybody, and they don't have support systems. They don't have, family or friends coming to visit them. And that's sort of how the Samantha character in my book was, because she alienated everybody. So I just wanted to kind of have a setup where, this is kind of normal for people for disabled people to be in this situation where, and I don't really say that about the client that dies in the beginning of the book. But that was very much like his story too, was that he alienated everybody in his life, and then no one wanted to visit him. And that's just the frustration of being disabled and not, especially like not being able to move your body if you have like a traumatic brain injury or whatever it is. People tend to shy away from that, and that's sort of why I use that experience to kind of like open up the story, is just to show, and that's another example of how I sort of use the memoir to kind of narrate and kind of mold the story to how I wanted people to perceive it. Because that actually happened later in my career as a caregiver. So yeah, that was real. That was all real, but it just didn't happen like at that time. Yeah,
exactly at that time. Yeah, cool. So Sam is a great character because she's always calling Daniel frat boy and shouting at him and all this kind of stuff. And I think she's a very, very likable character once you kind of peel off that rough exterior of mild abuse. Once you kind of get away from that.
I think everybody reacts to her differently, because some people think she's like the antagonist of the book, and other people like. I wanted to write her character in a way that would make people sympathetic to her, because she just doesn't have a filter. I mean, she's not a bad person. She's not like, I don't think she's necessarily mean to Daniel in the book. She can seem very angry and disgruntled, but she just wants like to be taken care of properly, you know. And especially like my character is not doing his job correctly, so it's like and I think a lot of people perceive that as her sort of ragging on Daniel as being mean to him. But I mean, being quadriplegic is awful. It's very frustrating. It's very maddening. It's maddening. And I really wanted to show like sort of the human side of that and how she kind of copes with it. And the way that she copes with it is being very inappropriate and swearing and telling dirty jokes and
a little swearing, a little sex stuff.
So it's very much like I didn't want her to be an antagonist in the book. Some people perceive her as the antagonist. I wanted to show people why she was so angry. And even in the end, as things are becoming more difficult between me and her, and our relationship is becoming more toxic, it's not like we didn't care about each other. It's not like she didn't care about me. You know, it's just, that's just how it is. You know, it's like living with a roommate that you want to get along with, you want to care about, but there's just too many difficulties and frustrations, and it's not like you hate the person, but I wanted her to be like more of a sympathetic character. And I'm kind of discouraged because a lot of people are like, oh, she's the antagonist, like she's a jerk to you, like she's the bad guy. But that's not really how I really wanted to like write the book, with her as sort of like this aggressor, but that's just how people perceive it, I guess.
Interesting. And it's very brave of you to be well, how much is biography, how much is autobiography? We can guess, I suppose, but it seems to be very. It seems very very naked, the book. So that's very brave of you.
Yeah.
Was it your intention to talk about yourself and calling the character Daniel? Were you open to the idea? Is it supposed to be very obvious that it's you, or were you trying to sometimes hide some maybe embarrassing facts to yourself?
Well, and Daniel is a pen name. So it's all sort of meant to like kind of mask like who I am a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you read my first book is even more raw and embarrassing and gritty and naked in a lot of ways. So my first book is probably even more so like stuff that I even say right in the beginning, it's like, this is all the stuff I wouldn't want a stranger to know about me, you know?
Yes. Okay.
It says that right in the beginning of my first book.
But here it is for thousands of strangers.
Yeah. So that's just how I write. I mean, I just write about, I'm honest about what happened to me, and I write about some pretty hard topics, and I just like, I have the like privilege and the sort of bad luck to actually live a life that was really dramatic and worth writing about, you know. It's both a blessing and a curse, but you know, that's just how it is. I think like 90% of writing is just having something to say, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you have a lot to say. There's one last little thread I wanted to pull, which is the part where Sam, so she always calls Daniel Dad, right? Because he's kind of strict and she's a bit wild and a bit crazy and he's a bit more level-headed, you know. There's the part where he finds that she's got drugs, I believe meth, and, you know, he kind of freaks out about it and she's like, well, whatever, like, you know. Was that real? Yeah. Was that base, you know? Was that something that was tough to deal with?
Real. Yeah. I mean, everything that happens in the book is real. All that stuff is real.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't know, like when I wrote it, I was like, can I get in trouble for this? Like, you know? But it's like anything, like, you know, I mean, the worst thing that they're going to do to me is tell me I can't be a caregiver anymore, I think. But, you know, it's like, that was real. And like the England Swings song, I don't know if you guys listen to that Roger Miller song. That was real.
Yeah.
We listened to that song all the time, and I wanted to like include that in the scene where it's like England swings like a pendulum do. like when I'm giving her.
I liked when Big John came out. I liked when Big John was quoted. I love that song.
Those were all songs that we listened to. Like my client and I listened to those songs all the time. So they weren't like those were songs that kind of permeated through our relationship. Because she was really into that old music and she introduced me to a lot of it. And it's like, Big John and England Swings and there's a lot of songs like that where I wanted to include them in the narrative because they were such a big part of like our relationship with each other. So that was all stuff that was that we listened to often, like when I was caring for her. And it's just kind of, I mean, those they're timeless songs now. I mean, I don't know if anyone like young really listens to those anymore, but
I'm listening to Big John, but I'm not young, so I don't know.
Well, this is he reads a lot of Dean reads a lot of Victorian literature, that's what he considers a real fun time,
Just, old-fashioned stuff is my bag. But let me ask you, the book has just come out a couple of weeks ago, so where can they get it?
Well, the main place people can buy it is on Amazon. I know that there's Amazon in the UK. That's the main place to get it. There's local bookstores in Minnesota that sell it.
Okay.
But if you're
in Minnesota,
if you're gonna walk into the bookstore in like Leicester City or something, like they're not gonna have it.
Awesome.
But we can get it on Amazon, which is where most kind of books do seem to be being sold nowadays anyway. So that's grand.
I wish it was
cool. Well, I'm glad.
I wish it was in bookstores, but it's not quite to that point yet. So
it's just easier with Amazon,
yeah.
It is. Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you the same. We always ask everyone the same final question, and I don't give you a chance to prepare for it. But I like to know what authors are reading. So I ask if there's any book any existing book that you wish you had been the one to write. What would it be?
Well, my favorite book is very short. It's The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I don't know if you read it. They made it into a movie. It's like a poetry book, but some of the things that he says are so profound.
Is it from Iran or where was? I mean, I heard of the
book. Yeah. I think he was from. I want to say he was from the Middle East. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what his background is, but they made it into like a children's movie with Liam Neeson.
Okay.
Like narrating.
Oh wow. Okay.
But it's like some of the stuff that book says, I'm like, God, I really wish that I could write like that, or I wish I would have written like that. But it's like the premise behind the book is it's a prophet, or it's a man that was imprisoned, and he's finally getting his leave to go back to his home country. And all the people in the town gather around him, and he's telling them like these things about life and stuff like that, and he's like kind of expounding this wisdom like Jesus or the Buddha or a prophet would, and it's very beautiful. So I mean it's not a long read. It's like more like poetry. I would definitely pick that book up because it's amazing. I mean,
sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's quite a unique answer. That's good. Well, Nick, thank you very much for calling in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And as we said, you can get Burn the City to the Ground and now on Amazon.
Right.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks
very much, guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Too, man.
Well, that was awesome. And Daniel calling in just as we were about to talk about his book. And of course, you can get it on Amazon. So do check that out.
Thanks very much for calling in.
He sent me his first book too, just to read as a PDF. I have to look at that. Yeah, haven't got around to it just yet, but that's
very
nice.
It's lovely.
So we're almost done. I think the only thing we have to do is our recommendations.
All right.
Now, before we get to our recommendations, I will tell everyone that if you go to booksboys.com, that's where you can find a portal to all of our episodes, all the different places that you can listen, our Patreon's on there, some of our other projects, links to our music on Spotify. So it's a good overall first, portal to go to find out other stuff about us. PJ, I did a swindle here and I didn't tell you this, and I'm very sorry, but I've done my recommendations a little bit differently this month.
All right.
So rather than just recommending a book, what I've actually done is my top 3 books of the year. These are the top 3 of all the books that I...
as well.
Yeah.
I should have of other books.
The top 3 books that I reviewed on the show in 2021. Okay. So I split the year
into 3.
I'll
do that too then.
Cool. I didn't give you prep time. I'm very sorry. But
no, I have to improvise.
These, and I recorded this in video form. It's already on our Instagram. But my top 3 books of the year. So from the first section of the year, we did episode 5, a whole episode on Zafón, Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And it's the final one in the quadrilogy, the El Laberinto de los Espiritus, the Labyrinth of Spirits. And that's the big, long 1,000-page one that, even though it was in Spanish and it was very long, I read it in a week or a week and a half because it was just so amazing. So that's the Cemetery of Lost Lost Books, right? De los Libros Olvidados. Cementerio de los Libros Olvidados. And it's The Shadow of the Wind is the most famous one. It's the first one, but we did a full review of that. So that gets in my top 3. Number 2, around the middle of the year, I mentioned it earlier actually, Dumas' The Count of Monte Cristo. And that, it was hard. I loved all the Three Musketeers stuff, but there's so many different books there and it's hard to pick one, whereas Monte Cristo is just an amazing book on its own. And it's a very long book again. It's also 1,200 pages, but I absolutely love that one. One of the best books ever. And Alex was telling me it's one of his favorite books as well.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I almost forgot. It is
my number 3 is one of our own authors, Jonathan Edward Durham, Winterset Hollow, the one that we talked about recently.
Wow, still love to read that. That sounds very intriguing.
It was so good that it actually did make it into my top 3 of the year. That's the one that Watership Down turns into Battle Royale, and that's all I'm going to say.
Great. Well, I'm going to go for, I think I read these all around the summertime as well. Well, I did read the first one, first of all, I read twice in spring, winter, spring, and summer, which is my dad's novel. Karen Burke, musician and author based in Northern Ireland. Highly recommend you see his music and his plays. But he's also got a novel, actually a third novel, which is coming out soon, I hope. And actually, it's not a release date yet, so I can't say much more. But it really moved me a lot, the story. It's about Ireland. It's about his childhood at the same time. And it's also a bit of a thriller going on there, but it's philosophical. I can't say more. So I've already reviewed it. It's great. Then I would go to Mommel by Michael Ende, which we reviewed also in the summer, which is about a girl seeking a girl who's got an abundance of time, and these time thieves coming to this Italian city and stealing everyone's time, and she has to basically save the world by giving the people back their time. That's essential. And it's a lovely novel, a children's novel on the philosophy of time, and it's quite scary actually at times, in a very philosophical way, in a very sort of weird. It's all about we ourselves are taking our own time, and these time thieves are just a metaphor. Love it, and I'd love to read it again actually. And third of all, I was thinking Alice Adventures in Wonderland, but I think I'd have to pick Automated Alice, which is a postmodern model. Remember that one?
So it's your favorite of them.
Yeah, I think I even more than the originals. I really like this postmodern take about Alice, the real Alice, of 1860, going into the future of Manchester, and as a parallel Manchester, which is basically it's filled with these anthropomorphic creatures, basically, and everything's chaotic. And there's a beautiful chapter in it where she meets the author, and it sounds corny, except it's not. It's actually very philosophical, because it's kind of a thrilling book. It's it's all over the place. But then there's just this kind of noon part. I think his name is Mr. Midday, and actually Jeff Noon, obviously.
Yeah.
Jeff Noon. And she meets him, and there's this quiet moment just for a second. It's such a lovely novel. It's so much fun, and really he imitated the style of Lewis Carroll really well. And then the more time Alice stayed in Modern Magister, the more less Carroll-esque it became and more Noon-esque. And I love that, actually.
That's really good. It's a very good touch.
A great ending as well. So Automatic Alice by Jeff Noon.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's our top books of 2021. That's pretty much us done. I suppose all I want to do is just to reiterate, thanks to everyone listening. And you heard the big list earlier of all the stuff that we did in 1 month on Patreon. And next month, there's going to be another Playboys. We're going to do The Winter's Tale, hopefully. There'll be more Dark Place Dreamers and interviews in the vault and everything else. So patreon.com/booksboys is where you can get that for less than the price of a cup of coffee. We're basically paying you at this point, that's how low the prices are. We're not quite paying you, but guys, that's us. In terms of the song to end with, we didn't get a chance to do a Christmas song this year like we did last year. We were too busy, but we might have something, maybe something coming up next month. So what I thought I would close with is my new song, which is In La Casa de Orense. Nice. Still haven't decided if it's any good or not, so if it's bad, I apologize. It's still relatively fresh. It's a cappella. 90% of it is. It's a kind of a doo-wop style. And it just talks about spending good times in Orense with Valerie the Pigeon Detective and so forth. So I thought I would play that. It's a short one, so we'll play that and we'll play our outro credits. And that is us. That's the last time we're going to recording a couple of days early just because it's New Year's. So this is going to be our last recording session of 2021.
Well, hope you had a great year and we'll see you next year.
That's it. So we'll play the song, DJ, spin that record, and we'll be back in about a month.
See you.
I think back to a time when you used to be mine. You were my princess, you were my angel divine. Oh, you were the one, more radiant than the sun. Oh, taught me so much, I tingle at your time. In La Casa de Orense, another feast has been made, where wines were done. Those were such a great time. You wanted the abuela and Paris there too, and Jose and Cary, and then there was you. Some of the best meals of my life, and then the Subra Mesa lasted half of the night. Oh, should I had saved? Oh, what a life we've made. When the sands are gone, and all I have left is my sad song. You're beautiful, you're honest and true. Oh, there is no one like you. Even though you won't be long, I really hope that you will still remain in my life. Oh,
Books Boys was presented by TheDean and PJ Burke in association with Thaddeus Penguin Productions. This episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Christmas Aristotle. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at booksboys@hotmail.com or visit us at booksboys.com. The intro uses Driving in the 70s from the Of Soundtracks and Garage Bands EP by Trapdoor. And the outro uses Dog's Light by Bravo Max from the album of the same name. All music used is either podsafe or used with permission. If you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/booksboys, get the show early and all of our bonus Spoof Fan the Boys shows, and you can also check out our music on Spotify or Apple Music. Thank you kindly for listening to us. Please tell your friends, and come back next time for another episode of Books Boys. Read some books!
In his masterpiece, I'm going to have to cut that out now. What's his masterpiece? His masterpiece is often considered, I didn't finish that book actually, but it is very good. Okay.